Ladies and gentlemen, GERI Petitto.
I'm not an addict, I'm just an ass. And in time this too shall pass. I'm not an addict, I'm just an ass. GERI Petitto taught the class. I'm not an addict, I'm just an ass. Loves the answer, the greener grass. I'm not an addict, I'm just an ass. One day at a time, free at last.
When you don't know just what to do,
Just what to do, just what to do.
if what you're feeling is really true,
Is it really true? Is it really true?
just keep your ideas safe and sound.
Safe and sound, safe and sound.
That's exactly how change is found.
Change is found, change is found. I'm not an addict, I'm just an ass. And in time this too shall pass. I'm not an addict, I'm just an ass. GERI Petitto taught the class. I'm not an addict, I'm just an ass. Loves the answer, the greener grass. I'm not an addict, I'm just an ass. One day at a time, free at last.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Geri Petitto Show on HamiltonRadio.net. Have I got a show for all of you people tonight? You won't believe my guest, okay? I want to let everybody know out there what's happening with me, which a lot of cool stuff is happening. We're going to do all that, though, at the end of the show. Normally, I try to do it in the beginning. We're going to do that at the end, okay? Because I need to introduce this lady right here, right now. So tell everyone your name and talk loudly into the mic.
My name is Teresa Phillips Sorosky,
Tell everyone the title of your book.
and the title of my book is Keepers of Golden Dreams.
And what is the title of your second book you're working on?
It is being in print now, right as we speak. The title of the sequel is Living the Golden Dreams.
I cannot wait to read that one. So everybody out there who knows me knows I write poems for all my guests. Well, I have to read this poem, okay? Because then you'll know a little bit, just a little bit about her story. Okay. So, Teresa,
Yes.
my guest here tonight will blow you away. At 89, she wrote a book with so much to say. Part 2 is coming. It's almost done. The story is true on how it begun. Teresa Sorosky is her name. Keepers of Golden Dreams brought her fame. First-generation American, same story as my own dad, coming over to live here with all the trials they had. Her parents were from Slovakia, immigrated to the U.S., the turn of the 20th century, so their family could be blessed. She is a coal miner's daughter. In Pittsburgh, she was born. The year was 1930, her parents tired and worn. Teresa had 12 siblings. Her mother was real tough. Her mother worked her butt off, so her children had enough. Teresa got married to George. 1950 was the year. Then they moved to Hightstown, now family's not so near. Teresa started having kids at the age of 22. At 42, her 7th kid, change of life baby, it's true. She ended up with 7 kids, 6 with college degrees. She finally got her license, a car, and a set of keys. 12 grandchildren Teresa has, and 14 greats. Baba, she's known as. You and hubby were married for 55 years. In 2005, he passed, a day filled with tears. In the 1970s, cut 2 gospel albums for fun. Hightstown Catholic Church, St. Anthony's, where it was done. On a trip to Italy with the church, she even touched the Pope, Pope John Paul II, with a photo of hope. So I want to say I loved your book. Reading your story was off the hook. I read it on a plane and cried the whole book through. Made me feel my family's pain. For that, I must thank you. We only hear their stories, but never really know the heartache they endured because they loved us so. They never shared their pain. They only shared their hope. America the Beautiful showed freedom in the scope. Even though my dad is gone, after reading your story, I then looked up at the sky, said, thank you, Dad, for glory. I can't wait for part 2. You really touched my soul. When I grow up, Teresa, to be you is my goal. God's looking down with joy. He's smiling so at you. The day you finally meet a hug, he'll give you 2. I can't not cry.
I'm crying too.
I can't not cry about this woman and her book and her story and her family. This is for you.
That is beautiful. Sorry.
So, you asked me what I thought of your book. There. I took your book with me to Florida, and I had plans that I was going to read the book on the way home. So that was my plan. The plane wasn't full, so I was in a 3-seater alone. Thank you, God. I was sobbing the whole trip. People were looking at me. So, first of all, I want to share my thoughts, and then you're going to tell your story, okay? You know, as a child growing up with my Italian family from Italy, my dad came on that boat to Ellis Island at 13 or 14 alone. And he came not speaking the language to meet an uncle he never met who was his sponsor. Imagine today us sending our child or grandchild and saying, you're going to go to another country so you can work and help us financially and, think about their lives. But even me, I would hear some stories and I never knew the depth of it because they never complained. That's the other thing. They never complained. So, the way we interpreted their story was, oh, my dad was sent to meet his uncle, and, worked and sent money back and his whole family came over and here we are. Yay, we're all happy. But this book shows what they went through before, during, and after. I couldn't believe that this is what actually went on. So I want to say this to everybody out there, first of all. Buy this book because every single one out there, I don't care how old you are, I'm sure your families were immigrants at some point. So this will tell their story as well. This book is unbelievable. One of the best books I've ever read. And I'm going to tell you something. I've read a lot of books because I have to read a lot of books for guests, right? One of the best books I've ever read, okay? I've never cried my eyes out reading a book. So having said all that, let's talk to everybody out there. But, I have a question for you first.
Okay.
So the little girl in this book, the little girl was your mother.
Yes.
The little girl was unbelievable. She begged her mom to let her work, right?
Right.
And she worked for, who was the family?
This was the Baron. They
right.
They were ruled by the Hungarian government because that's who, after the First World War, no, it must have been before that, they gave Slovakia to the Hungarians. And so they had to, whatever rules they had to go by. So he was called the Baron. And so whatever happened, the Baron used to make sure that somebody was working in they thought it was a castle, but it was really just a big, beautiful house. And they would be, if they were asked if they wanted to work there, they would ask their parents, and their parents would let them or not. Well, my mother she wanted to work there because they had no money. And so when the Baron asked her if she would want to work there, she said yes without even asking her mother.
Now, let's tell them how old your mother was at the time.
My mother had to be about, I would say, 12, 13.
Okay?
Yes.
Think about that, guys.
Yes.
And you know what touched me the most? My dad's personality is like your mother's. There was no stopping them. It didn't matter. If they knew they could help their family, they were going to do whatever it took to do it. And that's what your mother was about.
Yes, exactly. And and it reminded me of when I was growing up, because I was small and I was skinny and I had more energy than I could even use. And that's what she had. But her mother didn't want her to, because she knew what she was going to have to put up with. They had to waxed the floors for them because they had, they had events that they had everything just so. And either that plus you had to go down to the brook that ran right in the middle of town and get water from there in order to have, they had, I don't know how their arrangements like a bathroom. I'm sure they didn't have that, but they had something that they didn't have to have an outhouse. And so they had to get water for them to take baths if they had something to take a bath in, or even to wash up. They had to get water from the thing. And the young people who worked for them they had a wood on their shoulders, and on each end was a bucket. And they would go down and fill the buckets and walk up to the house, their house, and they would deposit the water, and they would have to, I don't know how many trips they had to make in order to get as much water as they needed.
I want to interrupt you for 1 second. I have a cousin watching, Michael John, I love you. His dad and my dad were brothers. My dad's gone. His dad is still here, my uncle. And this is our family story, Michael. This is our family story. Her grandmother was Nonna. I mean, this is what they went through. This is unbelievable. So she wrote this amazing book.
And I wrote it because I wanted the grandchildren who didn't know them at all to know, and they didn't know the full story, because my mother was an amazing storyteller, and she told us all about it. And I think I benefited most by it because I moved out to New Jersey after I got married, and I would go home to visit, and I would be with her most of the time. And if I wanted to go see my sister, she'd say, "Oh, hurry back," so she could talk some more and tell me more. And it was amazing. Even as old as she was, when she would get off on another tangent, which she often did, she would, when she was done telling me what she wanted to tell me, I'd say, "Mom, remember what you were telling me before?" She'd say, "Oh, yes." And she'd go right to it again. I was so amazed by her, because as old as she was, and it was just she was such a gift to me, because she did so much, and she was never complained, and she was so patient, and I think I was a brat, but I don't know.
Let's talk about your grandmother for a minute.
Okay.
Okay, because you talk about your grandmother was the beginning of the story. I mean, that was unbelievable too, reading about your grandmother. Now, your grandfather died.
Yes.
Tell everyone how your grandfather died.
Well, he had been in Pennsylvania in the coal mines, and he came here for I don't know how many years, and they were in Slovakia, and he would send money home because that's how they had to do it in order to survive. And he came back because he wanted to bring them all back to Pennsylvania. So he had
A horse?
I forget how it was. Oh, when he got back, he decided that he wanted to get a horse, because they had to do everything manually. Everything they did
Their horse was getting older.
Yes.
The horse was getting older. They needed a new, younger
Yes.
horse.
But he decided to pick this horse. He had to go to another town to get it. And he decided to pick this horse who was very feisty. But he thought he would be more likely to do more for them. So that's what he did. And on the way home, he had it started to rain and lightning and thunder. And because the horse was very sensitive, there was a flash of lightning and a jolt of thunder. And the horse reared, and he got so scared, and it knocked the wagon that he was in into a gully that was on the side, and the wagon fell right on him. So he was there under the wagon, and he couldn't move. So the horse went back to where he had come from.
That's incredible.
And that's how they knew something had happened, because my grandfather bought the horse because he wanted to keep him. So they knew it was somebody, whoever bought him wasn't on the horse, so they knew that. Excuse me. So he had broken ribs and everything when they finally brought him back home, and he had to heal, but they didn't have what we have now, so he just had to wait until he was healed. And then there was a wedding. The neighbors had a wedding, and they wanted him to come to, and he was feeling okay. So he went to the wedding, and he got thirsty. So in those days, what they had, they dug a place in the ground, and it kept everything cold. So it kept everything cold, and he knew where it was. And so he went to get a drink of water, but it was so cold in there that it gave him a chill. And so he came out, and then he just couldn't get rid of the thing. It made him sick. And then he just lingered a while and died slowly. So that's how he was dead already. He was very young. And my mother, it was just after my mother was born. And so she didn't know. She really never knew her father.
So when your grandfather came back to them, that's when your grandmother got pregnant with your mother.
Yes.
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 Okay.
That's when she got pregnant with my. And in those days, of course, it was very, nobody talked about sex or being pregnant or anything. And as many children as my parents had, I never knew anything about it. I didn't know she was pregnant, and I didn't know where the babies came from.
Of course.
And I was almost married by but it was just something that was very private. Yeah. And they wore, my mother used to describe the things they wore, the skirts and petticoats under it, and there were yards and yards of material in what they wore, so you couldn't tell. So
Crazy.
Yeah.
So it was almost, they didn't want people to know they were pregnant, correct?
I'm sorry.
Was it that they almost didn't want people to know they were pregnant?
They were. It was like something.
A taboo?
Yeah, it was like a taboo,
Wow.
and she didn't even want to tell her friend next door because she didn't want her to. She hadn't told her old husband yet, so she was kind of keeping it to herself.
So I want to comment on that because there was a part in the book, and it shows, I'm talking about this for a reason, guys. It actually shows the differences in generation to generation about sex. And I'm just bringing this up because I thought it was very interesting. There was a part in your book where your grandmother, I believe it was worried about telling your grandfather she was pregnant. And that just shocked me because he came home. He was away for a long time. Of course, him and his wife are going to have sex. There was no, condoms back then or anything. So didn't he think she's probably going to get pregnant? And how could it be her fault? And why should she be upset or scared or sorry? Like, didn't that go on? Like, it was so weird to me that they actually were worried about telling their husbands, thinking the husband was going to be upset that he got her pregnant. See how different things were and are,
Yeah. Well, the thing was, too, he said he was going to take them all to Pennsylvania. And she was worried that he would be upset because they couldn't go till after the baby was born.
Right, but he still caused it.
Yeah.
I just had to bring a little humor into that part.
Good. That's good.
So, all right, so let's talk about now. So your mom went to work because she knew, she's 12 or 13 years old, and she knew her mom needed her help. That was unbelievable to me. So she went and worked for them, but they took very good care of her.
I think the reason they did was because of her personality. And she was always singing, and I took after her. I was always singing too. And she was so personable. And she was such a joy to be around. And it never left her. It never left her. Her nephews and nieces, they would come visit her, and they just thought the world of her. So you'll see.
You know, it's really funny about, like, I believe 100% that everything happens for a reason. And if you really look back in your lifetime, you'll look back sometimes 20 years and you'll say, oh my goodness, that's why that happened, because of something that's happening right now. Things happen for a reason. If your mom did not go to work for the Baron, he couldn't have sponsored your family.
Exactly that.
And your mom was your grandmother was against it, and your mom said, no, absolutely not.
Yep.
So really, if you think about it, your mom was really like the family savior.
Yeah.
Right?
She was. She was a family savior, and she worked hard. She never had to do anything other than that. But she just made up her mind that she was going to work there. And if she hadn't gotten the job there and was so well liked, she would never have come here. And my father wouldn't either, because
There you go.
when they found out that the war was on the horizon, the teacher, his teacher, said, I know how to get out here. I right away I thought of Harriet Tubman, because they had to travel by night and sleep by day, and they had places to go, and the teacher knew where they could go. And so he came by himself, but he said it's going to cost a lot of money. And so when he talked it over with my mother and my grandmother, my mother said, I have the money to give you so you can go.
From her working.
Yep.
From her working.
From her working with the Baron. And the thing was, when she started working for him, he just really took a liking to her, because she was so, like I said, she was so vibrant, and she was such a hard worker. So when she was going to get married and she went to tell him, he was sorry she was leaving, and he said to her, if there's anything you need, let me know. And they would have never come over if she hadn't worked. And
go.
if he hadn't said that, she wouldn't have known. And the magistrate was mad because he thought he controlled everything, but she showed him that he wasn't the controller of everything.
So I want to also talk about this other part in your book, about the teacher. So it was your dad who was talking to the teacher. Is that right?
Oh,
Who was it?
Well, they would go to the pub.
Yes, but was it your dad?
Yeah, that was my dad and the teacher
And
and
his
his
teacher.
friends, I guess.
His teacher. How old was your dad at the time, about?
Well, I found out my dad was about 5 years older than my mother.
But when that went on with the teacher, before,
Oh, well, before they could only go to 5th grade, and then they had to stop going to school. And from that point on, they were allowed to go to the pub or whatever.
so he was really young with that conversation.
Oh, yes. Yes, he was.
Okay, so my dad only went to up to 4th grade. I never ever thought about that until I read your book, like the depths of that. Being told, that's it. You now can't go to school anymore because you have to work. 4th or 5th grade. Imagine us doing that, right? Think about that.
Oh, I've thought of that very often, because we were so privileged. And as you'll see in the sequel, my older sister, that was 4 years older than me, was the first one to go to high school. And I mean, because the others couldn't go because they needed help. They needed help at home, and the boys had to go into the mines. And it's really fascinating how things worked out. but I always wanted to travel. When I studied geography, I thought, I want to go places. I want to see things. So when I got married, I thought I was going to travel a lot. Little did I know.
You had a lot of kids.
Right. But before we got married, I said I want 10 children. I loved babies. And I took care of my nephews and nieces. And I told him I want that many, and he didn't say no.
So another part of the book with the teacher, I want to talk about this.
Yes.
So, the teacher told your dad there were rumors of this war coming.
Yes.
What war was it? Tell everyone.
This was the First World War.
Okay, you understand this, guys? The First World War. Think about this, and there's a reason why I'm stressing on this. We didn't have Google back then. They had no telephones. They had to do everything with letters or send couriers, right? How did they find all this out? Think about how they were capable. What am I trying to say here? Like survival of the fittest, right? They knew how to survive.
Yep.
Guys, we would never be able to survive the way they did. This is just unbelievable. Reading this book, she touches on everything. So I'm reading it and I'm thinking, well, this teacher knew that the rumors of this war were true. And based on that conversation, your dad, right?
Yes.
Took action.
Yes, he did.
And told your mom and your grandmother, and they believed him. It wasn't even like they didn't believe him.
No.
And then because of that, that's when your dad had to leave your mom.
Yeah. He had to leave my mom, but my mom, when he told him when he said about why he would have to go, she didn't want him to die in the war,
Right.
Because it wasn't even the Slovaks that were causing the war, and they were leaving. They left from Germany, and I had a problem because I thought Germany started it, but he didn't. I went into the computer and researched it, and it was the Hungarians that were having issues with the Serbs. And I looked it all up because I didn't want to put something in there that I didn't know about.
My daughter's half Hungarian. I have to tell her about that.
Yeah. I researched everything. And it was so interesting when I did research it because I didn't know what the war was about, and I thought Germany was it. And my father left from Germany, and Mom and my grandmother left from Germany too, but they came after, not long after.
So let's talk about that. So they had to travel to Germany first?
Yes, they had.
Why? Tell everybody why.
Because the ships left from there. And the first ship that I didn't even realize until my niece sent me things about it, they left on, my father left on a ship that was better than the Titanic. It was all with gold. In fact, I read the story about it, and the gold was so heavy that they had to start taking things out of it, out of the ship. But they ate like almost as good as the passengers who paid a lot of money to be on it. But my mother and grandmother came on a steering ship, and that was the last boat that went out of there.
Out of Germany.
Yes.
So now, let's back up a spec here. I want everybody to really feel what she's talking about. So the family had to get on a smaller boat to go to Germany, right?
Right.
There weren't planes. They didn't take a plane ride. Okay?
Right.
So they had to conjure this all up and know what they were doing. Imagine that. And leaving family members. So let's touch on that. So now, your mom and your grandmother, right?
Right.
Wait. Your uncle, was he already there?
My Uncle Wendell was already there.
Talk about that first.
And he had to have a sponsor, so he had an uncle that sponsored him. And he had to have a promise of a job before they would even let him go, go at all. And so he did. He left earlier, and her sister Clara and her husband were all, I don't know if they were already here too. And they settled in Pennsylvania. So my uncle, he was already here. He had a place, and that's where they went. And that's who sponsored my grandmother, my Uncle Wenzel. And that was her brother, my mother's brother. So they had there, and when my father came over, he had to have a job too, and he started right away working. I think it was in the mines, but he went where Wendell was. And that's where they ended up until they went to Pennsylvania, to Nantiglow, to the small town of the coal company, you know.
So now let's talk about the boat to Ellis Island. Let's talk about that. So, again, when we hear the stories, and I, heard the stories, my dad was on that boat. They came on the boat. That was pretty much it, I'm thinking they were taken care of, they slept good, they ate well. That's not the case.
No.
Tell everybody about the boat ride and what went on before you were even able to get off of the boat.
Well, my father went on a beautiful boat. He had luxury on his boat. But when my mother and grandmother went, they were on a steerage boat. And they were down in the, they had hardly no fancy things at all. And my mother was pregnant. And so when they called them to go on the ship, they separated them according to the alphabet. And my grandmother's name was Goliath, and my mother's name was Philip. So they were different. So they put them in different parts of the ship.
Now hold that thought. There was a possibility that they were afraid they were not going to be able to see each other or meet up when they got off that boat, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. So, and here again is the hand of God.
Yep.
My mother used to sit there, and she was sick the whole trip. She threw up the whole trip. And she didn't want anybody to know, because they heard that if you're sick and you go, they're going to send you right back.
That's right.
So she didn't want to tell anybody. So she would sit there and not go anywhere except sit in front of the door, the place where they were staying. And so the young kids, because she was only, I think she was 16 when she had the baby. Oh, wow. And so there were a bunch of young kids there, and they wanted her to come and play with them. And she said, no. She said she would sit there and pray the rosary. So one time they came back from playing, and they said, the one, I guess it was a girl that told her, it's funny because where we go and play, there's an old woman that's sitting there. She's saying the rosary just like you. And my mother said, take me to her. And from that point on, she never went back. She went back to the room. But she knew where she was, but she was with her mother. And her mother would make sure she ate, and when she had what she needed, and it was so sad. I had to cry even writing about it.
Yep.
Yeah.
I was sobbing with that, okay? I'm picturing my family, and I'm saying, could you imagine being worried you're going to get off this boat and never see your mother? They didn't have technology, guys. They didn't have cell phones. They didn't even have phones. They had nothing. Think about that, right?
They only had letters, and
Right.
my father and mother kept in touch. They wrote letters.
Yes, wrote
They
letters.
wrote letters.
That's it.
That's the only way they could keep in touch.
Could you imagine us today having to only be, think about it. We couldn't survive.
I know, and I think the children today have too much.
Oh, please,
They
let's
really
not
do.
go there.
Yeah, let's not.
Please.
So what other questions?
Okay.
Okay.
So now they got off the boat. They were together, thank God. And you're right, God did have his hand in that. Okay, absolutely. Now, who was...
You want to talk about the storm they had?
Talk about the storm.
They were on the ocean yet, and then this big giant storm came on. And the boat was an old boat. So they put all the people all the passengers in the steerage part, the bottom of the ship, because they didn't want anybody running around and getting panicky. So they were all down there, and Mom said, I didn't even put this part in, she said the portholes were open. And she said the water was coming in, and they thought they were going to drown, and they thought the boat was going to go in half. That's how bad it was. And she said one woman really went ballistic with it because she was so afraid. And she said somehow or other the storm stopped, and then they let them. But they pounded the doors with nails so that they wouldn't go out. And they had to stand in there and sit in whatever they had in there, I don't know. But they had to wait, and they couldn't get out. If the boat had broken in half and sunk, they would have gone with them with that. So
now talk about they get off the boat.
Okay, they
And
get
who
off
met
the
with
boat.
them?
And they have, and I also researched this because I had visited the Ellis Island place.
Okay, yes.
Now, they got off the boat, and they had to go different places where they were taking their names and you know, introducing them to the country, and they had to give their names and everything. And so when they had finally done that, my mother looked very drawn and like she was sick. So they wanted her to, they thought she was sick, and they said she had to stay overnight.
Okay.
And she said, no, she was just pregnant, and she tried to talk them out of it, but they made her stay. And they had very little money, and they had a place to eat there, and they had a place to sleep. But it was like an infirmary. And so they had to, whoever had to stay there, and there were many that had to leave because they came sick. And the good part about before they left, my grandmother got a cold sore by her eye. And they both panicked because she thought that they wouldn't be able to go on the boat. So my mother was friends because she did more than just like work in the garden at first. She did a lot of things in the house. She ironed clothes, she did things, and she got to know the people that were in the medical part of it, because they had a nurse there, and they had everything that the Baron and his family needed. They had everything there. So when Grandma came down with the sore, you know, the cold sore, it was she went back to the Baron's house, and she said. She told the woman that would let her in what she needed. She said, "Oh, just go to the infirmary there, and you know,
Wow.
because they'll have something for her." And they did. They gave her some salve of some kind, and her mother started putting on her eye, and it went away right away. So they were able to leave when they had to. So that was another thing I was amazed at. You know, that they would have even things like that. But my grandmother was also very, she was very attuned to the things that you could go in the woods and find the things you needed.
Okay, I want to talk about that as well.
Okay.
Because we're going off the tangent a little bit with this, and then we'll bring it back. There's a reason why. I was just talking about what she just said. I'm a little crazy. I had snakes as pets and all that, and my daughter gets me the best gifts ever, and she bought me a snake massage for my birthday, and we just went recently to Brooklyn to Serpent Test, and she's going to be a guest on my show as well. And she had 3 snakes, boas, and, you know, big snakes, and I said, I need all 3 of them, because some only want 1, maybe 2. I said, I need all 3 of them. So I had these gigantic snakes wrapped around me. I'm going to share something with you.
Yes.
I had an injury, okay, with a big wooden chair, a very bad injury. My right foot and my left knee are still, they'll probably always have this little injury pain in it. The snakes settled. All 3 settled on my right foot and constricted for 45 minutes. My daughter was there taking pictures and videos. If she wasn't with me, she wouldn't have believed it. And the one giant gold one, yellow one, it wrapped itself, snuck under my left knee where the injury is, and wrapped itself around it and was constricting my knee. So nature, I was just talking about this because there's also dogs, and I know one, for drugs. They smell cancer in people, right? You've heard all that, birds. So back in the day, I was just having this conversation that our ancestors didn't need doctors to tell them, starve a fever, feed a cold, right? They knew what to do with every herb, with every plant, with every animal, okay? We are so stupid today. Not only have we abused all those privileges, okay, we've changed nature to suit our crazy needs, and we're destroying everything, including bees, right? We need bees. Think about it. There's not an animal out there that will ever attack you just because they feel like it. The only animal out there that does that is man, okay? Animals will only attack you if they're hungry and they think you're a food source and you're in their domain, so they're like, okay, this is food for me. Or if you threaten them, if they feel threatened, that's it. So what you just said just brought me to all this because I was just having this conversation. And you're right, like your grandmother knew. Nobody had to tell my nonna, your grandmother, right? Your bubba, is that right?
Bubba.
Okay. No one had to tell them what to do when they didn't feel good, when they were sick, right?
Oh my gosh.
What foods to eat. They knew. It was innate. So it was like a God created us. And, just that in itself makes me crazy when people don't believe in God, because where did it all come from? How did it all go in sync, right?
Right.
But you're right about that.
Yeah.
So she knew. She didn't have to be told. I just had to share that because I was just talking
yeah,
about
well,
this.
that's good because
You know?
people don't know that.
Talk in here, sweetheart. And
People-
the camera's right there.
People don't know that
Yep.
that nature has so many things that are so good for you. And I remember growing up, my mother knew just what to do, and I never wanted to tell her I was sick because she would give me a
Tonic.
enema
Yeah.
first, and then she would rub before you go to bed. It was rub you with liniment, and that's a horse's medicine.
Okay.
And so I didn't want to tell her. In fact, one time, I'm going to write a book, Child of the Golden Dream.
Tell them.
The third book is going to be A Child of the Golden Dreams, and you won't even believe what I went through.
That's
And it-
gonna be a
so
cool
natural,
book.
so natural.
Okay.
Everything was and it was so simple. It was so simple. It was such a simple life. And we ate so good. We didn't have much to eat, but we ate good. And I had a voracious appetite. So I was always eating anything I could find. Green apples, green grapes, everything.
So, all right, I want to go back to being back home, okay, not in PA, right? So, having babies, because the stories that I was told, my nonna, she died at 100. She's, I think, close to 15 years now, 14, whatever it's been. She died at 100. And this, my dad had, I think there were 9 of them altogether, 8 or 9 of them. She had a couple miscarriages, and the stories we were told. And think about it. They gave birth in the fields. My nonna would be in the field with all her little kids, getting the wood or gathering this, doing what they needed to do to survive. And, go 10 miles down the road and get the midwife. Really? Think about that. Well, I'm laying here for an hour in pain, right? And I'm going to have a baby soon on the floor of this field. But no one had to tell them how to give birth. No one had to tell. You didn't need they knew what to do with the umbilical cord. They knew what to do with the baby. Immediately attach it to the mom. They knew everything. Where'd they learn all that from? Think about it.
I don't know. That's amazing to me because I knew nothing. In fact, nobody told anything about sex even.
But
Sex was a no-no.
okay, but do you know why your generation, you could say that I knew nothing, even though you did, it would have been instinct as well. But because you came to America, you came to America where now everything was so amazing. But
Exactly.
no, think about it.
Exactly.
So, all right, so now let's talk about that. So now they gave birth to all these babies. They had to do all this amazing stuff. They had to continue working even while the baby was a day old. They didn't get to rest for a month with the baby.
They got up the same day and started.
Okay. Well, I heard that,
I
but
can
I'm like,
picture
really, the
my
same
mother.
day? But I guess it was true. They had to,
They had to.
you know?
I mean, there was nothing they could do, but they had to get up and do what they had to do. By the next day, they were almost doing exactly what they had done before.
So,
And here we are in the hospital for a week.
okay. So now I want to ask you this. Your brother.
Yeah.
Wait. Your brother, yes, right?
My uncle?
Your uncle.
Yeah.
Your uncle. Okay. Yes. So now your uncle came, right? You had siblings that still stayed though? Aunts, uncles, right?
Yes.
So tell us about that because did your grandmother, wait, it was your grandmother's children, right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Did your grandmother ever not see any of her kids again? Was there one?
No, the ones that stayed behind were her one daughter, and she married somebody from a nearby town, and she stayed there. They never came up. They never came over to marry.
So when was the last time she got to see her daughter and she got to see her mother?
When she left Slovakia.
So that's what I'm saying. So she never saw her again?
No, she never saw her again.
So wait, go ahead.
And
Tom.
then my father, on my father's side, his brother, he had one brother who still, he never came over. I don't think, but it's possible that he did because you just couldn't, you didn't know how to get in touch with different people.
Okay.
Because America was so big, you know, they didn't know. So he had a sister. My father had a sister who stayed there, and a brother. And so I don't really know what happened to them because my father never had time to tell stories because he was always working and he was always tired. But my mother told me about after they got married, a little bit about the family.
So I want to talk about that a little bit, okay? Because I'm sitting here with you. You're 89 years old, right?
Yes.
And my nonna, I guess, like I said, would have been 114, whatever. So closer to your age than your mother's age was my nonna, right? You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So my dad's family, they all ended up here. So they were all together till this day. But my great-grandparents, those are the ones that would be more like your grandparents, right? Your grandparents. Yes. So I can't imagine what they went through knowing I'm going to America because it is best for the rest of the family, but I'm never going to see this child ever again or this sibling ever again. My mom is leaving. It's best for them, but I'm never going to see my mother again. I'm never going to see my father again. This is a final goodbye. And again, I'm not talking about my grandparents' era, really, because it was a little bit more, I guess, easier at that point. But my great-grandparents, her grandparents, right? Think about that. We're saying goodbye forever. Like, I can't imagine that.
Well, when I came out to New Jersey, I always wanted to travel, and I thought this was traveling, but it was settling down. And I thought I missed my family so much, my mother and my siblings. We were all so close, and I just missed them terribly. And I remember having my first baby, and I was giving her a bath and crying because she wasn't there. And I cried and cried. But like you said, it's the reason I came out here. I would have never gotten this book published. There was no opportunities there. There was no incentives. And the ones that live there love it there yet. And I would have too if I had stayed. But I would have never accomplished what I did here. And I learned how to use a computer. I worked in the rectory.
Imagine that.
And it's amazing to me because it was hard. It really was hard for me. And I didn't like using telephones either. It hurt. It took me so long it took a long time for me to, when I was looking for a job, I wanted a job that I didn't have to answer the telephone. So I did find one, but I got married and I came out here and gradually learned how to use the telephone. And what I didn't put in the book is my mother, I did put that she went to learn English for a while.
Okay.
But with all the kids she had, she couldn't continue on much. But when she did learn how to speak she knew how to speak a little bit anyway. My father never could go to school. So she started saying the words, and she would say the words with the wrong syllables.
Make us laugh.
And when she'd say therapy, she'd say therapy.
Okay.
And so what else was there? There was another word that I knew really.
Changing the sheets. Changing the sheets?
Oh, yeah. She would say, my sister-in-law, my oldest brother's wife, they would come and visit, and Mom made everything. She had to sew everything. She made quilts, and she had a lot of material left over because she had to make all the clothes for the kids and everything. So my sister-in-law said to her, Mom, can I have that quilt you made there? And she said, no. She said, but I'll tell you how to make them. And she said, you just get one. She said, you have all kind of squares, and then you get one sheet, and then do it on one side, and then you get another sheet and put it in the.
She's the only one who could curse on my show. I love it.
And we laughed so much. And she would say different words with put the accent on the wrong syllable.
Yeah.
And we'd laugh, and then Mom would say, you're laughing at me. And I would tell her, no, Mom, we love the way you talk. Keep talking like that. And answering the phone, my sister moved in with us for a while.
Talking to your mic, yep.
Oh, my
They
sister.
want to hear
Yeah,
you too.
my sister moved in. My sister Barbara, the youngest one. So she was here for quite a while in New Jersey with us, and she wanted to talk to Mom and Dad. And Dad never answered the phone. And Mom didn't want to answer the phone, but she had to when it rang. So Barbara wanted her to have a phone. And I said, yeah, that's a good idea because I want to talk to her too sometime. So she got her, at first she wouldn't let the guy in to put the phone in. And then finally Barbara talked her into letting her have the phone in it. So she got the phone put in, and Barbara would call her. She never called her, and she never called me. We called her, So she always sent Christmas cards for all the family and friends, and she would send away to get the holy ones. So as soon as she'd get the card, she'd call my sister Betty, and she'd say, she'd pick up the phone, and she could do her number. So Betty would pick up the phone, and before Betty said anything, she'd say, cards come, blink. Hang up the phone. And that was a standing joke for all of us. We always.
My dad's family, they all still have heavy accents. To the day my dad died, we would laugh and make fun of them to this day, but it was a beautiful, I would do anything to hear his accent again, you know what I mean? It's amazing for us. We love it. It's, we're making fun of it with nothing but love, My dad, unfortunately, didn't want to speak Italian in our home because they wanted to learn the American language, the English, so bad, but it was not good for me. I wish we learned it. But yeah, and I wish I could have really communicated with my Nonna and asked her certain things. And that was another reason why I think this book touched me so much, because I always felt that I didn't ask my Nonna questions about all this, and this book answered the questions that I wanted to know. You know what I mean? That's why. I mean, it was amazing. But, I wanted to ask you about, okay, so now the siblings, this is the other thing. So the daughter that she never saw again, did they write letters? Did they communicate?
No, my father wrote to his mother, and his mother wrote back to him, and that was the only ones I remember. Maybe others got them, but
Okay.
I don't
I wonder
I
if
don't
any of
think
those-
so.
Wouldn't it be something if you found some of those letters?
Yeah, they were in Slovak, so
Yeah.
we just, but finally, after the war, I'm not sure I put this in the book either.
Okay.
In one of her letters, in one of my father's letters, because they thought my grandmother was crazy on my father's side. She would get the money from from her husband, my grandfather, and she would go she'd go right to the borough, to the hall, wherever they kept the money in the
Okay.
not in the bank. They didn't have banks,
Right.
but in the I forget what they
In
were.
a pillowcase, like the
Yeah.
Italians?
Yeah, so she'd get it in the horse and buggy, and she'd go. Everybody knew when she got a check, because she would go right to the borough hall, buy a piece of property for each one of her children, and they all had property around her. And so finally, after my dad came here, he never went back. So he said and it was after the war, and he wrote to her and said, give my property to my brother Joseph, who was still there. And when he got a letter back, she said, I don't have any property anymore. The communists took it.
For
Took
real?
all that property from her.
Really?
Yes. That's what happened. So, she couldn't even give what she had bought to her children because of the communists.
Yeah, you did not put that in the book. I don't remember reading that.
No, even in this one, I forgot
Okay.
to put that in. I think.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Wow. I
But
don't
it
know.
was something because, and my uncle, I do have this. My uncle Hertak, he bought a farm. He and Clara bought a farm, and we always visited. We visited Uncle Wendell. We visited Aunt Clara and Uncle Steve, and we called them by their Slovak names, and we never called them by their first name. It was Wiko Hertak and Setka Hertak. And our godparents, we had different names for the godparents, what we called them. And that was Kresna, that meant the godmother, and Kresni, who was godfather. So we never used I have to even ask my cousin what his mother's name was, because we didn't call her by the first name.
Wow.
But I mean, we never veered from that. And when I taught my kids to say, like Mrs. Lemire or something, she'd say, "You could call me Kathy." No, they they couldn't break that habit of calling them. But it was just so different. It was just it was like an honor to have those names, and it just called them by the last name and what we called them. Setka and Wiko and Kresta and Kresny. And so we knew them by that. So we didn't even know their first names.
You know, there's so much going on today. I don't talk politics on my shows. There's so much going on today with immigration, right?
Right.
Okay. I am not against immigration. I just am against illegal immigration. Okay. I wish we could bring everyone over who, comes over legally. Okay? I remember my Uncle Carmine, okay, my dad's brother, he was the first one to come to New Jersey. He was a Marine. He was born in Italy, came here, became a Marine. And then my dad moved on the same road in Robbinsville from New York that my uncle was on, and my dad bought all the land, and we all had houses. And my cousins still live there. My brother still lives there. I just moved to a 55 and over, but we all grew up there. Same kind of thing. But my uncle, I'll never forget, he said this. He said, "I'm an American first." He said, "I was born in Italy. I love my country. I'm Italian, but I'm an American first. And what this country has done for me and my family, I could never repay." And that's what he said. And I think that's lost. See, I think that's what's lost. You know, back then, our families came here thinking they were going to work their butts off for their families.
Right.
Today, that's not what's happening.
No. Well, I agree with you totally, because they had to have a sponsor. They had to have a job.
Right.
And they went to Ellis Island
Right.
before they went anywhere.
Yes.
And they had the tracks there.
Yes.
You knew which train you had to take in order to get to the place that you wanted to go. And now they just come in droves. And we just can't afford it. We can't feed them. We can't take care of them. And we have, but like you said, busted our butts to get where we are because we worked hard. And they are getting so much. I mean, not all of them, but they're getting free things.
It's just different. We've lost what
Yeah.
the purpose was.
And it's not
You know?
fair to us.
And my family's name is at Ellis Island. Is your family's name there? I'm assuming, right? Because they came through there, sure. That's unbelievable.
But see, they don't have any place to go to get, because of the transportation is so available, whatever, even to walk and that, they have good, when they had to walk before, they didn't have paved roads or sidewalks or anything else, even walking through the woods.
Okay, let's talk about that for a minute.
Okay.
Okay, so guys, think about this, okay? They get off the boat, Ellis Island. They're off the boat. Now, someone had to meet them, correct?
When they got there, they didn't have to meet them there. They knew where they had to go.
Okay.
And so,
But they had to walk where they had to go, correct?
well, they had the trains there for them.
Okay, they did have the trains there.
Yeah, they
Okay,
did have the
okay.
train. They had a lot of tracks, because I visited
Okay.
that too. And that they would know where they had to go, and then they would, and a lot of them got on the wrong train and ended up somewhere else instead of where they were supposed to go. So
wow.
it was so, it must have been so scary to not know where you were or where you were going for sure. Because they told them what train to take, but they didn't know America. And if they knew exactly where they had to go, then they were okay.
Oh, my
But some of them, and very many names were changed too, because what they heard, like my father's name was Philip. Then he said Philip, they put PHI, and as many kids as they had either PHILIP, PHILIPS, PHILLIP, PHILLIPS, and everybody had a different name. And the only way we knew that was because when my brothers joined the service, they had to have their birth certificate, and whoever wrote what was on there, they had to put down. And Emery, I think Emery was one of them. Paul had PHILIP, and John, he had PHILIP.
So you know what else? Is this true? Did they have a right to just change someone's name if they felt it wasn't a Christian name?
Not that I know of, but I know the priest was that we had was very particular. When I had my third daughter, my sister Marge was going to be, and her husband were going to be godparents. And at that time, they had to be Catholic, and they had to be blah, blah, blah.
Because the names you mentioned, Philip, Paul,
Yeah.
what was the other one? John,
Yeah.
apostles.
Yeah. Yeah, but that was their, Philip was the last name. Oh, Philip was the last name.
Right.
The
Oh,
others
okay.
had their first name and then Philip.
Crazy.
But I always bragged that I had 4 saints' names because I had Teresa, Pauline, and my confirmation name was Marie, and the last name was Philip. So
There you go.
4 saints that I
Okay, there you
had.
go. You're covered, baby girl. You're
I
covered.
covered all the bases.
Oh my goodness.
So they had, when I called the rectory to have her baptized, the priest was old, and he was from Ireland, and he was very much into, everything that he'd learned. So he said, "And what's the name of the godparents?" And I said, "Margaret and Elo Bartolotti." He said, "What kind of a name is Elo?" That's it.
That's great.
That's an Italian name. Just put it down.
That's great.
Because he never heard of the names. Because he was a priest from the time, I'm sure he was young when he went to be a priest.
So Teresa, let's talk for a few minutes. We're going to be coming to the close of the show soon. We've got time, but let's talk a few minutes about your second book. So it's going to print as we speak.
It's being printed
Okay.
as we speak.
When do you think it'll be out?
I don't know. I've had 2 things of corrections. It has to make sure that everything is done right. But whoever's editing it or printing it is sending me a copy to make sure that I go over it to make it. But it shouldn't take that long, I don't think. It's going to be longer than it's going to
So
be.
it's a bigger
yeah.
book than this?
Well, it's after they come here and the things that transpired, plus I talk about all my siblings and about what happened, and you're going to be crying again.
Thank you.
And it's just so, I cried through writing the book because all these things came back to me, and I was number 9. So I remember my mother talked to me more because came out here, but before that, she talked a lot because the girls got married, the older ones, the boys left for the service, and then they got married, and so it was just my few sisters that were around me, and it was, I just didn't know how to adjust when I came out here because I didn't have any. I made a lot of friends, really good friends, and they took care of me.
How old was your mom when she passed?
She was 86.
Okay. So imagine what she saw in her lifetime.
Oh my gosh, you'll see what she saw, and it was really sad. But there were good times too. But it was so hard at first. The first part of the book, you're going to cry the whole time. It was just so tragic.
So Teresa, is there anything that comes to your mind that you want to share with our audience about anything you want them to know?
Well, I was a very precocious child, and I was spoiled also. So my mother would tell me to go to the store because she couldn't leave what she was doing, and I never wanted to go because I was in my bare feet all the time, and I would have had to put my shoes on, wash my feet, and put my shoes on. and I remember one time we had the kitchen in the basement, so there were stone steps that went into it. So she wanted me to go get something from the store, and I said, "No, I don't want to." And she said, "Yes, you go and do it." And I started to cry, and I was sitting on the steps crying and crying. She didn't once come to me and say, "You go or not," nothing. She waited and waited. And finally, I knew she wasn't going to give in. I should have known that. But I finally gave in. I had to wash my feet, put my shoes on, and go, because I was playing, and I didn't want to stop playing. But each of us was so different. You put up with the different people in your life, in your siblings. But we all love to sing, we all love to dance, and I have that in the book too, because that was our life. And the rules of the church, I don't know if you remember much of the rules of the church, but they were terrible.
Okay, so I'm glad to hear you say that, but go ahead, finish talking and I'll tell you. Go ahead.
Okay, so we couldn't eat until after midnight. And I remember my brother Paul, he would get sick while he was serving, and you could see his face getting white, but he couldn't do anything about it. So sometimes he had to leave where he was kneeling and go to the side door there. And my mother would get to Mass on mornings if she could. And I must have tore her heart when she saw him getting sick, because you couldn't do anything about it. You just had to put up with it. And I was always hungry. I was hungry morning, noon, and night, and in between. And I had to fast from 12 o'clock until, and we had the church was right across, the school and the church were right across each other. And we would go to church at 8 o'clock, come out of church, go right over to the thing, and we had our breakfast in our bags, paper bags. And I couldn't wait, and I'd have about 3 sandwiches in here and maybe a treat or two, I don't know. We never even had treats, but I would sit there and eat everything. Never had anything to drink with it because we couldn't, there were no containers like we have today. And I would eat everything I could get my hands on.
I have a funny story about that. So I grew up Catholic. I'm now a Christian. I don't consider myself Catholic. I had to leave the Catholic religion and church. I had to. I'm not good with rules unless they come straight from God. That's it. I will listen to God. And believe me, I fight with God, okay? And he's got to hit me over the head and say, Jer, yes, Jer, no. And I'm not kidding you. So Easter, I'm at my daughter's family's, right? They're my family as well. And her cousin's little girls, maybe 10 years old, 9 years old, 11. I don't even think they're 11, like 9, 10, 8, 9, whatever. And the parents said, okay, you guys have to give something up for Lent. So the younger one said ice cream. Okay, that was really good, right? Do you know what the older one said?
What?
Broccoli. And she gave it up. I said, listen, when they told me, I was like, you are brilliant. I would vote for you. You're going to be the first female president. Yes, that was perfect, I said, okay? Okay, you got to be brilliant to come up with that. Think about it, right? So Teresa, first of all, I want to thank you so much for honoring me today with this interview. Second, I can't take it. I love your book, and I have an autographed copy now, guys. How about that? Incredible. I cannot wait for book 2. We will have you back.
I can't either.
And then if you really are going to do that book 3, we'll have you back for that one as well.
Okay.
Okay?
It's an honor for me to be here. I had no idea that I could ever do this, or anybody would want.
Tell them that. What?
It's an honor for me because I had never done anything like this, and I didn't know anybody would want something like this from me because I've never done anything like this before. But the book has been, I have not had a bad comment about it. In fact, I have a nephew who's very negative, and he called me and he said, Aunt Teresa, he said, I'm calling about the book. And I said, oh, here it comes. So he said, I just want to tell you that I loved the book, and I said, I'm so glad that you wrote it, because he knew that my mom and dad, their grandparents, but he was a very negative person. He went through a lot, though, because he had, there were things that, happened with him. So I just want to say this has been a pleasure, and I hope that you could understand everything I was saying, because I was getting very excited about everything.
Perfectly.
Okay.
Perfectly. So guys, again, Keepers of Golden Dreams, listen, buy this book. Do yourself a favor, okay? Buy this book, all right? So I want to just tell everybody now what's happening and what's going on before we close the show. So on Tuesday, May 14th, next Tuesday, okay, I'm having a huge benefit with the owner of Friendlies in Robbinsville, Lee Paroli. We're having a huge benefit, guys. for the CARE program in Robbinsville Township, okay, for addiction. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about what the CARE program is doing. Let me tell you about the benefit first. So, the Capris, there's a moon out tonight. Remember that song? Okay, if you Google it, the whole world knew that song, okay? You'll know it as well. So, Michael D'Amore, the new lead singer, he will be coming out for us, and he will be singing. Guys, come out, have dinner, Robbinsville Friendlies. Everything starts at 6. Try to get there a little earlier. We're going to give some a percentage of the meals also to the CARE program. I don't say this lightly. I've never said this to any other entertainer ever. I am an Elvis fan. You have no idea, okay? I didn't even think other entertainers existed. Elvis Presley is here. Michael D'Amore is right here. You will not believe how off the charts this guy is. He's got a surprise for us, okay? Michael has a surprise for us. He's bringing someone that I can't even believe is coming out. Back in the day, do you remember a song, 1, 2, 3, Red Light? And Simple Simon Says? Okay, so Frank Jekyll, he's coming as well. Okay, we've got a magician coming. Oh my goodness, Cliff, our very own here at Hamilton Radio. We love Cliff. He's coming out. Okay, he's incredible. I have John Monforto coming out, who's an incredible impersonator, and he's coming out for me as Rocky. Okay? Off the charts, guys, off the charts. So it's going to be an incredible fundraiser. But I want to tell you about the CARE program. So everyone out there who knows me knows I am the author of I'm Not an Addict, I'm Just an Ass. I'd rather be a smartass than a dumbass. 28 years later, today, I can honestly say I'm now a smartass. Okay, guys? No longer a dumbass. So addiction is near and dear to me because I'm also a recovery coach. I'm also a nutritional health coach. So I help families, I help addicts, okay, because they are not worthless, guys. Keep that in mind. They're people. And it can happen to anybody. I don't care how rich or poor you are. I don't care where you live. It can happen to any family member. And unfortunately, there's not a person out there that does not know someone that it's been affected by it, okay? So Robbinsville Township started this program. Let me say, I always get the words screwed up, but I'm going to do my best. So CARE, Community Addiction Recovery Efforts. Yay, I did it.
Did a good job.
I went on a ride-along with Scott Kivett, Officer Kivett, who is the vice president of the CARE program. Jody Gold Stevens, who unfortunately lost her brother to addiction, to opioids, she's the president. They started this with the chief of police, Chris Nitti. They were all on my show a few weeks ago talking about the CARE program. So I had the honor and privilege of doing a ride-along with Officer Kivett. We had the canine Corey in the back car with us. Sure enough, this man said, over there, we're going after that car, 8 o'clock at night. Sure enough. She had heroin in her car, needles. He knew. He's unbelievable. His record is unbelievable. But here's the amazing news. He didn't just arrest her. He offered her help. She said, yes, we got her help that night. From Recovery Advocates. Okay? So now, anyone out there, listen to me carefully. If anyone out there is struggling with addiction or you know someone that is, you can go right to the Robbinsville Police Station. You can hand over your drugs. They will not ask any questions. They will not arrest you. They will offer you help. Tell them you need help. You got it. You got that? So you don't have to be afraid. If you need help, please, you can get in touch with me, GERI Petito. I'm on Facebook. We will help you. So that's what this incredible fundraiser is for. We want to raise so much money for them because they not only pay for rehabs, they pay for the food for the people. They'll help you get a job. I'm not kidding. So know that we're out there, okay, guys? Robbinsville Hot Rods, okay? Friendly sponsors the car shows. They started this past Thursday. They will also be there Tuesday night for us, and they're there at Robbinsville Friendlies in the parking lot there with antique cars. They will be there every Thursday night for the entire summer. All right? Come out, and if you come into Friendlies and say that you're with the car show, you get a percentage off. Got that? All right. So that's really cool, too. So now I'm going to tell you guys what's happening with me, and I need everybody's prayers. Keep your fingers crossed because this could be huge, huge, huge for me, okay? I was just given an award this week out of Germany, believe it or not, okay, for my internet radio status merit, okay? How cool is that for 2019? But here's the big news, guys. I am now, I'm with 4 networks now, 4 different networks. It all started here at Hamilton Radio, okay? I started here years ago, and through Hamilton Radio, I was picked up by PANJ Radio out of Lambertville, New Jersey. I was picked up by Beverly Nation Online Talk Show Radio. Now I'm with Damon Network as well, Damon Looks. I got a call from Brother Olasky from Beverly Nation, and he said, Jerry, I hope you're sitting down for this. He's the one that told me about this amazing award that I just received. I am a nominee for the 2019 International Internet Hall of Famer, all over the world, guys. Wow. So this could be really huge, and I'll know if I won by November. So keep your fingers crossed for me with that. All right, this could be, forget it. I don't even know. So I wanted to tell everybody that. I want to close with a poem out of my book, all right? Because a lot of people that are listening to the show tonight are probably thinking, well, why would I want to help addicts? Okay? They're only going to use this money for drugs, blah, blah, blah. They deserve it. They do not deserve it, okay? I want to read the final poem. I'm revising this book as well because I'm going to be adding a lot of stuff now that I think I can, because they, you know, Simon & Schuster published my book, Archway Publishing, through Simon & Schuster, and there were some things they didn't want me to put in, but I think I can do it now. I'm figuring out a way to word it, okay? But I'm going to read the final poem out of my book, guys, okay? And with that, we're going to close the show.
Okay.
All right, Mama. Change, your choice. Before I read this, one last thing. I do want to say this, and this is important. I do not believe addiction is a disease. I'm going to tell you why. I've studied the human body. I've cured myself of 2 cancers almost 30 years ago. I've traveled all over the world with health tours through Lenox Hill Hospital, Russia when it was communist, okay? And 2 things did not make sense to me. Things have to make sense to me. When we were told addiction is a disease and the person is powerless over their addiction, but then they tell the family members, your family member who has a disease, who's powerless over this disease, needs to hit rock bottom, you can't help them. Throw them out if need be. Don't give them money for food. Take their car. If your loved one truly had a disease, you would throw them out if they're powerless over it, or would you try to help them? So that never made sense to me. So it contradicts itself. So I knew they weren't telling the truth. The percentage in these rooms are so low, it's something like 7 or 8% of people that actually do get well. That means to me, they're doing something wrong. So I'm going to tell you what addiction is. Addiction is a dis-ease of the brain cells while using. And it could be food, could be sex addiction. Trust me, anything that you obsess about and that ruins your life, your brain cells have been altered. The good news is this. They can be changed and healed like mine were. I changed my entire life. 30 days I went to meetings like I was told. I got a sponsor. I said, I want to shoot myself. I want to change my entire life and not ever use drugs again. And I got to walk into these rooms and say, hi, I'm Jerry, I'm an addict, I'm powerless over my disease, and hear about everybody's war stories and talk about drugs every day. It's not the way to do it. Now, if you have no support system, guys, I'm not telling anyone who has no support system to not go if they really are helping you, okay? But I'm telling you that if they're not helping you, and that's just another addiction of yours, the meetings, some go to 5 a day, get in touch with me. My services to you are free. If you say you heard this on my radio show, my services to you are free. Okay, guys? Because you can heal 100%. So now I'm going to read the final poem in my book. Change, your choice. I had a life-changing moment that I knew had to be. The only way to change things was to first start with me. So I looked in the mirror and woke up one day and thought to myself I needed to pray. So I asked God to change me, to help me stay strong, to clean up my mess, to right what's been wrong. I cleaned up my diet, I cleaned up my room, I cleaned up all habits with this old dirty broom. I kept going forward and never looked back. I refused to derail, stayed on the right track. I realized my worth and all that did matter through my selfish behavior, the lives I had shattered. I finally decided at 30 years old to stop abusing my body, my mind, heart, and soul. My life-changing choice that I had once made, over 28 years now, my debt has been paid. So you read all my thoughts on how to stay clean. It's all or nothing, my friend. There's no in between. To live or to die is a choice you must make. Your life is not worthless and you're not a mistake. One day at a time is a slogan you've heard. It works if you work it while applying his word. For you to get healthy, for your mind not to fail, escaping reality will keep you in jail. With addictive behavior, sex, drugs, food, or money, substituting addictions, now isn't that funny? I'm not an addict, this too shall pass. I'm not an addict, I'm just an ass. But today, 28 years later, honey, I'm a smart ass. I'm no longer a dumbass. Thank you, everybody. Good night.
I love you.